table? We got a problem there mechanically?
I'm just stuck.
She's in the
Okay.
I'm in the hole.
bridge there.
Now you're all set. Before we start, I just want you to know that we can work this, this work session can take as long as you need, because we've advertised it, that the meeting, the regular meeting will follow this. So I just want to put everybody at ease on that. So, first discussion is going to be the proposed update to the Transportation Master Plan and 5-year CIP street project recommendation. David Ramirez.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to come back this evening to finish up from last week. I call this part 2, but really what it is, it's to discuss 3 areas: the City Transportation Master Plan Update Recommendation, a revised list of the recommended 5-year CIP road projects, and then lastly, if there are any follow-up questions regarding MAG from last week. A little background on the City Transportation Master Plan. The original master plan, which you can see the cover on the right-hand side of the screen, that was adopted back in 1984. It was actually a 22-page document that covered not just transportation, but covered utilities and pretty much all aspects of development. And there was about 5 pages devoted to transportation in that document. In 1987, this city updated that transportation master plan into a full-size document.
We were noting on this little diagram he has, says the town of Goodyear, Arizona. So everybody was, that's what you heard the whispers about. That was quite some time ago, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
This is really loud, guys.
Thank you, David. Go ahead.
You're welcome. So in 1987, City Council adopted the updated Transportation Master Plan, which looked at 18 years through the year 2005. And it was much more comprehensive in that it dealt with not only the street infrastructure, but it began to look at other aspects such as transit and bike paths, as well as equestrian. And also a component of this was there was an ongoing master plan that was being put together by the county. It was called the West Valley Transit Study, which dealt with transit, obviously, and it was incorporated into the city's master plan as part of the document. So it has not been updated since 1987, and so we're recommending that, for the following reasons here, that council consider including this in the 5-year CIP update for road projects beginning in July of 2012. Just as you can see, are some of the major reasons. Really what it does is it documents and formalizes the council's vision and goals as it pertains to all aspects of transportation. It addresses and supports the need for community as well as economic development in the city. It also serves as a street planning tool for council and staff, especially as we move further south in Goodyear for development. For example, south of the Estrella project, we're beginning to see, or we have seen, some proposed master plans in that area. There's a major drainage wash called Waterman Wash. There are 4 or 5 bridge crossings of Waterman Wash, which are currently shown on our general plan circulation element. What this study could do is confirm the location, as well as help, guide the city as to when each of those crossings will be needed in order to support development as it comes in. The multimodal transportation elements, just expanding or better defining transit and also expanding bike paths and other, say, non-motorized types of transportation. I guess one area of interest is the truck routes and restrictions as they exist today, and reevaluating or re-looking at those citywide to see if any adjustments are needed there. And then when grant opportunities do present themselves, if we can tie the application, the project application, to an element of the approved transportation master plan adopted by council, that gives it added weight when they go to rate that project against others that they're competing against it. That was really my presentation on this aspect, the city transportation master plan update. If there are any questions
on this part?
How much money will we be talking
Yes,
about?
Gary.
John asked.
Oh, I didn't hear
John
John.
asked the
Sorry,
question,
John.
and then-
John, you were first. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just asked David, how much money are we talking about?
Oh,
about 3 years ago or so, when it came up the last time, it was in the $500,000 to $600,000
it was
range.
500, as I remember it.
Right. We're looking now that we think it'll be in the $300,000 to $400,000 range. And part of that is, I didn't mention, but I should have, currently community development has begun the process of updating the general plan, which will go into effect in 2014. And in the general plan, there's a circulation element, which is actually this part of it here, that covers the same types of items, streets, non-motorized, and transit as a major component. So I've already talked to Harvey Kraus about coordinating this update with the general plan update as far as the circulation element, doing them in tandem, and so that together they would, first of all, they would support each other, and then the update of the master plan could expand the level of effort that they would normally do on the circulation element. So it would cover everything, at least as we can identify it, to get us through the next 20 years.
Right. Gary?
Do we need to, have we done a special committee or a citizens committee to do this? And the other question is, as we talked about funding, we would have to actually fund this in next year's fiscal budget if we're going to go do this.
For the transportation master plan update?
Right.
Yes, it would. We would define it as a project in the CIP.
Okay. But my real question was, could the general plan committee that we have citizens and other interests that form this committee, would they suffice in working on this plan as the citizens' representatives, or would we have to have a whole new citizens subcommittee to review and give input to that, or would we not do that at all?
I think I would recommend we do the first. I haven't actually talked to Harvey about that, but I would think that the committee that would be overseeing the entire general plan update could also, look at the circulation element.
Okay. In greater depth, because we're going to do a 20-year plan versus the 10-year general plan, which covers the higher level type work that we would do. Okay.
That is correct. At least I would support that. I haven't talked to Harvey, but I think that's what we would propose to do.
Well, there is some economies of scale and some synergistic effects that you can get with that if we do it together. Even though it's a little more work, I think we could, actually get two good products out of that as a result of that. And I would encourage Harvey, where are you? I would encourage you to work with David on this.
And he said he would already, but we just hadn't talked about that particular issue.
Thank you, Gary. Councilman Campbell?
Has there been any conversation regarding golf cart access on our city streets, especially to and from the mall?
As I looked through the general plan circulation element, there was an item that talked about that type of use. I
could interject there. I can tell you, we did have that question. They came back to us, and there will not be a golf cart path that will go to the shopping center.
Why
That
can't
was the
we
last-
talk about it if we're going to update the plan then?
It
Because
wasn't that, it was,
So-
yeah, we can talk about it,
Yeah.
but the fact of the matter, it can't be physically done. They said they couldn't physically do it. And you know, we could get the information, because it's there, and kind of,
It's a,
it's a,
you have to have, if a road is set for a 35-mile-an-hour or higher speed limit, you cannot have what they call a neighborhood electrical vehicle, NEVs, and that's what I think we referred to.
Yeah.
But the question comes down to is, as we look at things, maybe we should reconsider a way of making this work. I strongly agree with you that I think that was one of those things that we weren't very happy with the general plan, the way it came out because of that issue.
from 87?
I'm talking the 2003 general plan, but
Well, in 2003, a lot of our developments weren't developed, that people do use the golf carts. And we do have golf carts that do go over 35 miles an hour. And I've had some conversation with some folks that were disappointed when we did the Bullard Wash area and developed it, that there was not any provisions made for golf carts, which would have been the perfect logical way to get them to the mall, to and from the
it
mall.
were
But
complicated. John, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, when we did look at this last time, I mean, there is a way to do it. It involves Pebble Creek, however, doing land, and HOA said, no, we aren't interested in
Well, they
doing
may
that.
change their mind because Palm Valley now uses golf carts like crazy, and you see them going to the Wigwam from Palm Valley all the time on our city streets. So, you know, we may need to address that
Well,
because
and-
gas is so expensive, and this would be easier for them to go. They take up less parking.
mean,
They
all the-
save the
yeah.
environment. So
Well,
I,
and we had I remember a year or two ago that Newland came to us, or whoever was the owner at the time of Estrella Mountain Ranch, and they had discussed wanting to have NEVs within their whole area. I remember that discussion. So if there's never ever been a more opportune time to discuss it, it
it's
would be
now because we're opening it up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it'd probably be good to bring Westcor back in on that conversation. Yes, Joe?
No, I tend to agree. I think it's worth the discussion, but again, I'm also concerned with the safety. You know, I mean, I've driven through Sun City, and when you see those things on the street and you see people in the cars, the traffic, I want to make sure whatever we come up with, it's safe, because I've seen the golf carts in Pebble Creek on the sidewalks, okay? And, you know, also on the streets, probably where they're not supposed to be, because the speed limit's, what's it, 25 or?
35.
35, where you see them, you know, a little bit slower rolling through there.
Joe,
So
what they were looking at is they were looking at around the wash, coming through, is it El Paseo? Is that, and through there, Rio Paseo? But now there's a problem with, is it 207? What was passed about property rights? And anyway, now,
Prop 207.
I was right,
Yes.
thank you. And so there is a problem now with obtaining those rights, and when they put that development in, there was no discussion whatsoever with the landowners. We have a lot of mountains to climb on it. Happy to pursue it, but just so you're aware of that. Sherry?
I was just going to ask about the plan. Will it have mass transportation in it, and will that be working with whatever MAG has for this area, or do we know what MAG has, or do we just put what we want and then send that to MAG? How does that work?
MAG currently is doing a study in the southwest area looking at the circulator buses as well as fixed routes. It's underway.
I also mean more like rail or bringing something in to connect us to the rest of the valley if this is like a 20-year plan.
I think we would want to include that. I'm not sure how far we would take that, but we would definitely want to address that in the master plan. In fact, I mentioned the MAG study because once we see what the end product of that will be, that'll because it'll cover Goodyear, Avondale, Litchfield Park, basically the southwest area. When we see the final product there, we'll be in a better position to kind of fill in the gaps with our plan, either what they did not address or what we think needs to be expanded in what they did address.
Okay, so is this just for our city? That's just us identifying what we want to see in our city, right? Okay, okay.
Joanne, did you have a question?
Well, I'm just thankful it's coming back to us. I know that this was something, we wanted 3 years ago, and I'm glad we're moving forward. And to Sherry's comment about, let's look at everything that we
Yeah.
would think of. This is for another 20 years, whether it's rail and bus circulation, neighborhood circulators, the whole shebang. I'm just glad it's coming, and it sounds like an added benefit, which we didn't discuss that I recall at the last 3 years, is that being able to do this gives us a little better, I don't want to say umph to grants or to opportunities like that, but this does help us, because that's a big chunk of change, $300,000, $400,000, and so this obviously, we know it's a benefit anyway, but if it also helps us get funding in the future, that's even greater. So.
And it does, because the feds that, or the group that evaluate these recommendations are looking for community support, as at the council level as well as at the resident level, because there's all the stakeholders would have an opportunity to weigh into this plan. So I would support the application.
Well, I agree with you, Joanne. We wanted it and we asked for it, and you and I really pushed for it to have this transportation study done quite a while ago. And the answer was we were going to wait till all the MAG issues were done. Well, they're done, and it didn't have anything to do with us anyway.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, as far as our street, so I like that idea. I think you have to, when you look at this, Wally, on the golf carts, you're going to have to look really carefully on it, because also there was a discussion on parking places at the mall. So if you could put that on, as we were looking at to have an area for golf carts, and as I remember the discussion was, that would not probably happen. So we need to pursue that end of it too. Okay. Now, does everybody understand the memo that was sent to you around from our discussion last time when David was before us about MAG and TIP and choosing projects? So was that cleared up by the memo that was sent around? Just look at me and say yes or no.
I think,
Thank you,
Yeah,
Joe.
yes.
Appreciate
but
that. Okay.
I would suggest for the ones that may be watching is that didn't get a copy of the memo, just maybe a brief overview on
Well,
the TIF plan.
could we have Marina come up and
Yeah.
talk about?
I think
Marina,
that would help.
you come up and just talk
Mina's
about that?
prepared to do that.
Oh, great. Thank you, Joe, for mentioning that. So if you, just for the public listening, would you just state what you're going to explain, first of all, before you start? I mean, the title of this.
Sure, absolutely. So last week when we were in the work session, there were some questions about the MAG tip and how that plays in with our CIP, and there was some confusion with council about programming that and how the MAG rules have changed a little bit. And so I went ahead and put together a follow-up memo in coordination with John to help explain all of those questions. We went through the minutes to see what those questions were. And in the email that we sent out, it kind of outlined that MAG has a 5-year tip, and in the tip includes projects that are freeways, arterial streets, bikes, ITS, bridges, railroads. It just takes a whole slew of projects and it puts it in there. And the whole purpose of our effort here is that our CIP should have the projects that we want to include in the MAG tip. And that's part of the process at MAG, is to make sure that when we put a project into the tip, it's in the CIP and then it shows as funded, the local portion of it is funded. And also projects that are fully local funded or even privately funded should go into the MAG tip, because that helps explain to the region coordination. We can, traffic flow, air quality, all of those projects are there. So really the MAG tip is kind of like the regional CIP minus the utility projects. It just gives you an overview of what's happening in the next 5 years in the region. And that's pretty much what the email outlined.
Any questions for?
Didn't it also mention if once you put it in there, you pretty much have to fund it? They kind of frown on.
The time frame.
No, if you put it in there and you have it in MAG, moving money around or anything along those lines, they expect you to do those projects.
Absolutely. I mean, there's in the past it was a little bit more lenient on deferring projects or putting projects off a couple of years. The federal government has come down and said, look, this money needs to get spent. You can no longer hold it waiting for a project to get funded. So when a city is awarded a project, I think it's about 11 months you get before you know, to kick it off. And what happens is we have to do 2 reports a year now to MAG to show the progress of the project. And if that project is not moving forward, there is a year deferral allowed. For instance, if, you know, we're waiting for ADOT for something, for an approval, or we're waiting for maybe a study to move through and it's slowed something down, there is room for movement there. But if we don't have the local match, and it is the city's responsibility that the project is not moving forward, that project does come off, and the money needs to be released so that another city has options to get that money.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Molly?
Okay, I have 2 questions. Number 1, do we have a list of what is on the present tip from this city? What was identified previously? And number 2, do we have any projects that are currently underway that were funded that are not going to be finished that we have to turn the money back in on?
We do have a current updated tip list, and I can provide that to you. We just need to print it off online. And I don't think right now we have any projects that we are going through the MAG process right now to delete projects, and that's happening region-wide. It's not just our city, to delete projects that are not moving forward because cities are reassessing all of what they can and can't do. And so we are going through that process right now to find out what we will be building, what we won't be building. And so we are going to figure out which ones are going to move forward and which ones won't.
For our city?
Yes, our city, including all cities.
Okay.
And we can do that.
Are we interested in what other cities are doing instead of just our own?
We have to be, we're part of the entire process, so we would have to see, yes, we're part of the entire region on what goes out and what comes in, what money is available and what isn't. So
Okay, well, I only want to know about my city, the list for my city. I don't want to know about the other cities.
I can provide that. We can provide that.
Okay,
It's just
great.
as a representative MAG, we're
Yeah.
there to talk about the region, and we listen to everybody's, all the cities. So, and because of that, you need to be informed too, even though maybe you're really not interested, but it's our duty to make sure you do know. So if that conversation
Then
comes up,
can we have the whole list
and you
then?
see some other city that gets a project and you didn't, or we didn't get it, then you'll know the reason why. And so that, it's just information for you that's going to help you a great deal in your conversations out with the other cities.
Okay, I don't even know what we
Any other
applied
questions?
You'll get that for all of us.
Yeah, yes, I'll get you a link to the overall tip so you can kind of see what the overall tip looks like. You can see what all the other cities have in there. And then I'll separate what our city is, and I'll send that as a PDF so you can see the list of our
That
projects.
would be great. And that will go online so the public can see that also.
We can probably do that. I'm sure we can.
All right, that would be great. Yes,
Okay,
Nell?
the last question that I have is, moving forward in the rest of the presentation, we're going to talk about Goodyear projects,
Yes.
right? Those projects that we're identifying tonight do or do not need to be in the tip.
They do.
They do.
Well, if it's of regional significance, meaning, you know, it's going to impact the region's transportation plan, and or we may be searching for federal funding to go to pay for them, then they do need to go.
Then they
into
need
the-
to be in there.
right.
Okay. All right, that's
So
good
it
to
just
know.
would depend on the actual project, and David can kind of go through and tell you which ones would.
Okay.
Is that clear to everybody? No other questions? All right, thank you very
Sure.
much for coming up. We really appreciate it.
Can I have the PowerPoint? Okay, item 2. Last week, we discussed 3 types of recommended projects, the ADOT-related, growth-related, and economic development-related. What I've given you is a handout of the revised list. There's not many changes, but I'll go through them all. And actually, the next 3 slides will also show them individually. So we'll start with the ADOT projects. Also, I want to point out, I added a 4th bullet there for a possible 6th-year CIP project. Say, for example, one of the projects in the 5-year doesn't move forward, or there's enough savings on those 5-year projects that we have money to start the 6th. This would be the one we'd recommend to move into the 5-year plan. This is essentially the same drawing that we saw last week, but really the only difference is we went back and adjusted the overall list of projects, mainly by reducing the scope of some of the economic development projects so that we would have enough funding in the 5-year plan to cover all the ADOT-related projects. Last week, there was a big concern about making sure that we could complete A1, which is that half-mile strip up on Indian School Road on the east side of the 303. So that's now covered, could be covered in the 5-year plan. Financing, again, provided through arterial street development fees and one-time general fund fee revenue. And also, I just wanted to say, on the 19th of March, Finance will come in and actually present the draft CIP, and at that time, they'll discuss in much more detail the specific funding sources. So just quickly, it's the work up on Indian School, which is a piece of pavement on the east side of the 303, a traffic signal at Cotton Lane and Indian School, and then moving down to Saraville south of I-10 between Van Buren and I-10, completing 2 continuous northbound lanes on Van Buren westbound approaching Saraville, completing 2 continuous westbound lanes, and then on Saraville between Van Buren and Yuma, completing 2 continuous southbound lanes. So when this is all done, on Saraville we would have 2 lanes in each direction from I-10 down to Yuma. And then actually on Van Buren we'd have 2 lanes between Estrella Parkway and Saraville, along with replacing the span wire traffic signal there at Van Buren and Saraville. Those are the ADOT-related projects.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Bill?
Dave, the ADOT-related projects for these Goodyear feeder streets, it's still funded through ADOT? Is that why we're calling these ADOT?
No, they're actually locally funded. I'm just saying they're related to the ADOT construction. They're in response to ADOT building, for example, new interchanges at Saraville and up at Indian School Road.
Yeah, I get the Indian School one. The farther down the road, down Saraville we get, is farther south of Van Buren. It seems to be less connected to the 303, but
as part of the 303 I-10 construction, ADOT's going to be constructing new and on and off ramps at Saraville on the eastern side of that intersection there. So you'll be able to go, say, from Saraville eastbound into Phoenix, or coming westbound from Phoenix, you'll be able to exit at Saraville. You see that as creating new traffic volume on Saraville, and so we look to have 2 lanes in each direction, basically from McDowell, because that'll be taken care of also all the way down to Yuma for the additional traffic that we anticipated going to that interchange.
Yes, Joe?
I just want to make sure for clarification, as a result of the 303 improvements, this plan includes all of those, I guess, resurfacing the road or reconstructing the road, whatever it is, for all the traffic as a result of the 303, all of that's covered in this plan.
Yes, actually, last meeting you approved an IGA with ADOT,
Yes.
whereby, during the construction of the stack, ADOT will be using our surface streets for detour routes, and they'll maintain those detour routes for the duration of their construction. And then afterwards, we'll have available this little over $1 million to go back and improve. Not part of this, totally separate from this, actually.
Where's that going to show up? Because that's going to be, I would assume, part of our CIP somewhere, won't it?
It'll probably be captured under maintenance, because the detours involved are McDowell, Van Buren, Citrus, and Saraville.
Okay.
It's possible some of the Saraville money, though, if we go to improve the roadway, we may not need as much on Saraville if we do these other improvements. So that Saraville money from the IGA could be moved over to the other streets.
Okay. I'm good.
Any other questions? Okay, go ahead, David.
Okay, the next set are the growth-related projects. Really, the only change here is we added Project 6 as a potential 6th-year CIP project, which would be southbound Saravelle between Yuma and Lower Buckeye Road. So this would just serve to continue expanding Saravelle from I-10 all the way down to Lower Buckeye so that we have 2 lanes in each direction.
Any questions? Gary?
David, first of all, will the sidewalk projects need to be on the TIP plan, or are they something that's just totally locally controlled?
They would be locally controlled. The projects that would go on the TIP would be any project that would add additional through lanes. So we're adding a second, say, southbound or westbound. Those would all be on the MAG TIP.
Okay, but traffic lights and sidewalks are not required to be on that, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Wally?
Do we have to add any improvements that we're going to be doing to Bullard down towards the stadium in this list
Not part of this list.
when we straighten the road out?
There's a Bullard from where it ends now at Lower Buckeye Parkway down to following Bullard Wash or along the east side of the the Cleveland Indians and the Reds complex. That'll be that's a subject of this agreement involving M&I Bank. So once that's finalized, then that funding would allow Bullard Wash to be extended over to Estrella Parkway, but it would not be part of.
It doesn't have to be on this list. That's what I was asking.
We'll put it on the list and identify the funding. We'll put it on the CIP, but we'll identify the funding as this settlement.
Because we know we're going to do it sometime.
Yes.
So we might as well put it out there.
It is a CIP project, so we'll put it on the list.
Okay, thanks.
Joanne?
I'm sorry, David, real quick on the sidewalk improvement that you have at Yuma and Estrella Parkway. Isn't that the corner where Incement is, David?
No.
Where's that, Lower Buckeye?
That's
That's like down by M85.
By the post office,
Post office.
Oh, is that what this is? Thank you.
the recharge station.
Wasn't sure where it was. Okay,
it connects Centerra with the high school.
gotcha. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, Debbie?
And finally, the last group. This is the area that's had the most changes since last week. What we did is we scaled back what we call the economic development related projects. I guess the result is we focused the work on the major intersections, say at Van Buren and Bullard, as far as completing the intersection improvements there, including landscaping. And then the intersection improvements at Bullard and Yuma, which includes all 3 legs of the intersection and landscaping. And then we left in either of the 2 possible options for providing access to the west entrance to the airport. I'll just say a little more on the one at Bullard and Yuma. That also has a growth component to it, because currently in the east and westbound direction there's only 1 lane, which is used for through left and right turn movements. So as far as growth, we see that as probably needing to be improved to provide more turn lanes related to growth, not necessarily just to support economic development.
So what did you remove for the
What we
economic
removed,
development?
the roadway connection between Van Buren, on Bullard between Van Buren and Yuma. Last week we had that totally red all the way down for that full mile. And then we removed Yuma Road between Goodyear Boulevard and Bullard. We only left the intersection over at Bullard in there. We weren't really able to construct much of that in the plan that we presented last week, but we could have designed it all, but we wouldn't have been able to construct it anyway. So we basically redirected those funds first up to that A1 project up on Indian School, that ADOT related one, to make sure that was covered, and then we scaled back the economic developments just to include the intersections.
Question? Bill?
Okay, I'm going to try to summarize this, at least my level of understanding. Everything that is on this map, which we've seen on the slides, is staff's recommendation to put it in the TIP and to include it in the CIP.
Yes.
And that you have already identified funding sources for this? Or we're going to do that when it enters the CIP?
I've been working with Ken Kennedy in planning, and finance has projected revenues for the next 5 years. And based on those revenue projections, these projects can be completed.
Okay. So none of this requires us to win the lottery?
Right.
Okay.
The only project that isn't funded, if it's called E5, or I'm sorry, let me see. It's actually the E2. It's at Diamond over at Bullard Wash.
Okay.
That design is done. It's shovel ready. It's not in the CIP to construct, but it's we're looking for federal funding opportunities for that may come along.
Okay. Beside G6, which is the Saraville south of Yuma stretch, which you put in out year 6 or potential 6, are there any other 6th year, if I can say that, projects, or do we have anything that is shovel ready now that should or could be in here?
In year 6, or just I don't know of any other shovel-ready projects.
Okay, so we have nothing in the hopper, if you will.
Right, nothing that we're designing.
Okay.
At least not actively. At one time, Yuma Road was being considered, but we're not actively moving that forward right now.
Are you done, Bill? Bill?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
You can come back. Joanne?
David, when you say staff recommended and nothing's in the hopper, was this all discussed with our Economic Development Department? Are there?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I mean, just anytime we say, okay, we're going to fund this and not fund something that's economic development worthy, I want to make sure that it's understood that we don't foresee that this is going to be a benefit for at least 6 years. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, between last Monday and today, actually last Friday, I met with Paula and Harry Paxton and kind of described what we were attempting to do in terms of scaling these projects back. And they understood, and they were actually, it was really based partly on their input that these would be the projects that they thought would be of most value or
Great.
relevance to what they're trying to do.
Appreciate it.
Gary?
We scaled back the Bullard between Yuma and Van Buren. Is the design still going to be funded? When we do the design work for the intersections, are we going to be able to do the design work for the street between the two extreme ends?
We were only going to do enough design to make sure that, I guess, both intersections would connect. We'd established the alignment for the completed, for the road between, but we weren't going to go through we weren't planning to complete the design, the detailed design.
Okay, thank you.
Molly?
Okay, my question is, since you've identified funding for all of these projects, and we're going to put this in our CIP and it goes to MAG, are they going to give us any money for any of our projects, or all of these are on our own because we're telling them how we're going to fund it?
These are all locally funded projects. The ones that involve adding new through lanes, we'll put those on the MAG tip. That's
Through
what,
lanes
like for example, on Saraville where we have one lane northbound and we're going to add a second lane northbound, that would be additional through lane. So we would have to put that on the MAG tip. Same thing with Van Buren or, well, those are really, the same thing up on A1 up on Indian School. We would have to show that in the MAG tip because we're adding through lanes.
But we're going to fund it, so could they come back to us and tell us we can't do it?
No. As long as it's, the funding would be identified as locally funded.
Okay. All right, okay. So we're not going to look for federal funds then for anything, as far as we know, that we're identifying.
From what we see available, we don't see anything that would
Qualify.
qualify for
Thank
these.
you.
Sherry?
Just don't get.
Okay, I just have two questions about the economic development ones. The fact you took off between E3 and E4, I don't remember what the number was originally, but that one, that wouldn't affect what we're talking about, adding the fiber cable, would that?
No, in fact, we have fiber already running along that mile there, and we're in the process of hooking up our traffic signal cameras to it now.
Okay, and then why is, you made G6 kind of an out year if we get money project. Why did we do G6 as an out year if we get money someday project and not the other between E3 and E4? Just curious what the thought process was on that.
I guess we're looking at it more, putting more of the emphasis on projects that were growth related. There's 2 lanes needed southbound for that mile stretch on G6. When we're talking about Bullard Avenue, for example, connecting the two, we're talking about 4 lanes in the median, so it would be much more expensive to do. So just thought that was growth related and probably more realistic funding wise at this point.
Okay.
Any other? Bill?
I thought I heard that the Bullard project was not federally, it doesn't meet any federal eligibility. Would the Saraville meet federal eligibility? Or just none of them?
We haven't really looked at it from that standpoint, but I couldn't answer if it would meet all the clearance requirements.
Okay.
I don't know that there would be a federally funding program that Saraville Avenue could fall into, though. Either.
Okay. No, I got it.
Questions? I guess that's it, David. Any more questions on that
Okay.
one?
The next slide we covered, Romina came up and I think took your questions there. So I guess next step, we'll finalize with the draft a 5-year CIP for road projects, actually all the projects, and include the city transportation master plan update as one of the projects, and then tentatively schedule for the 19th. Finance will come back and present a work session on the CIP 5-year plan.
Very good. Thank you very much, David.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, since there are no more questions on that, we'll go to the briefing on the current state of the housing market in Goodyear and West Valley. Mario? Okay, now, how do I get to that? How do I go back?
Worksession 2.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to present and introduce Tina Tambour. She works for the Cromford & Associates, which is a company that publishes the Cromford Report, and that provides information on the housing market in the greater Phoenix area. So she's here tonight to provide some insight into the housing market in Goodyear, in the West Valley, and also greater Phoenix. So with that, thank you very much for being here, Tina.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Mario asked me to go over a little bit about our general market conditions for Goodyear in terms of supply, demand, pricing, and so on, and a little bit about our distressed market in about 20 minutes or less. So we'll just go ahead and get started. My first slide just goes over some of the, I hope everyone can see these, it goes over some of the headlines that do affect consumer confidence. And the first slide, which I might have trouble reading, to be honest, because I don't have my glasses on. But in September, we had a study that was put, thank you, by Move Inc. that rated Phoenix the 9th best amongst the 50 large cities for placing down real estate routes. Also in September, there was a bright forecast on the horizon that stated that Phoenix, according to Forbes magazine, Phoenix will be among the top 10 U.S. boom cities of the next decade, citing warm weather, pro-business environments, affordable housing, and more sustainable growth. In February, the Arizona Republic mentioned a look at the cornerstones of Arizona's future. citing renewable energy, healthcare and research, infrastructure, transportation, technology, and education. And that quite a bit of that is happening here in Goodyear as well, especially in the healthcare. I noticed your hospital is growing. Also in February, ASU and Mike Orr of the Cromford Report is the new director for the ASU Department of Theory and Practice for Real Estate. So he was quoted in this article that also stated that new home sales are up 49% in January from January of last year, and Goodyear ranked 4th in that with 43. They also mentioned the glut of homes that we've been working through our foreclosure industry for about 5 years now. So we are significantly ahead of many of the states in the United States that we are hearing in the news media quite a bit for national. Also in February, real estate experts, this was the Urban Land Institute, they were stating that they're guarded but hopeful about our real estate market. And that particular article stated that a lot of them had been wrong in the past, so they're almost afraid to be. They're like, well, we're hopeful, but we could be wrong. But we believe, actually, that they are right in the sense to be hopeful about the future. And in that article, it's also stated that builders and investors continue to buy in the Metro Phoenix area in anticipation of the decline in inventory. So hopefully we'll start seeing more of that. This is a little bit about our employment. Sometimes I feel that with these headlines, people see them and then they forget. So I always try to remind them when we had some good headlines in August. We were ranked 8th in the nation for job growth. In September, a month later, we were ranked number 6th in the nation for new jobs. And so many times we are reminded of what our state unemployment is, but not too often do we see that just for Maricopa County, our unemployment went from 9.1 to 7.7. And that's a pretty steep drop for just a year. Also in here, you'll notice January 10th, we were ranked 14th in the United States for healthcare jobs. And in January, we were ranked 17th in the United States for manufacturing jobs. And over here, this also came out in February that we were one of the fastest growing in the nation for the health and education.
And actually, on unemployment, we were less than that in Goodyear. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
5.6.
See? So there you go.
5.6 in
You're
Goodyear,
even-
so we
you're-
were.
I looked for
Yeah.
Goodyear. I couldn't find it
Yeah,
anywhere.
well, we'll
But
brag,
yeah, so
we'll brag about it.
You should. That's awesome. So, I mean, and employment is so important with the real estate industry. Didn't seem to be as important in 2005 when they didn't seem to care if you had a job, but now they do care that you have a job. And you'll notice here that the top growing sector was educational health services across the board. And this number here, for those who can't read it, is 37.5. So they created 37,000 extra jobs from year over year. So that overall, that's a good, ooh, this is a very sensitive mouse. Overall, that's very good for employment and overall sentiment. Here are our sales per year. This is a rolling average, year over year sales. So this is January to January, February to February. And this is a 10-year trend line for overall sales in just the Goodyear area. So as you can see here, this was the peak of 2005, just so you know. Those were the good old days. But as you can see, this was our decline. Right here was the first-time homebuyer credit, which 2009 did its job and it did increase demand. This was the so-called double dip that you guys experienced, which wasn't much. And Goodyear is still on an upward trajectory for overall sales. Compared to the other cities, this is where you are. You can see a lot of cities experienced the same. This is 2005 for Glendale. This was their decline. This was their first-time homebuyer credit. This was their double dip, and now they're also on the incline again. And they're probably at the same point for demand that they were in 2003. This olive tone is Surprise right here. And Surprise was a new city, just like Goodyear was back in 2001, still in the growth stage. So this came up here, 2005. This was their drop. And now they're actually just as high now as they were in 2005. This is Peoria. It's again the peak, the drop. And now they're also higher now in the number of sales than they were in 2005. So, and this orange one, just last but not least, this is Avondale. This was one of the hardest hit areas for the foreclosure crisis. So they have still maintained, a lot of this is driven by price, but they have definitely maintained a certain recovery, at least in the terms of demand. So overall, the west side cities, we are seeing a strong demand, and in some areas, record demand. And in Goodyear, for sure, you're headed on an upward scale, especially since you have more homes now than you did in 2001. So you guys are hanging in there pretty good. So these are some of the headlines that have come up regarding inventory. This is in January, late January. Is the housing glut over? Experts predict housing shortage by spring in Arizona. Also in January, there were positive signs that the local housing market continues to recover. And noted here, this is a Michael Orr quote, that Maricopa and Pinal counties are both in undersupply situations, which you have to be in a period of undersupply in order for prices to be affected. And also the Home Buying Institute, this was a national article that came out that stated federal housing market analysis, inventory is still a big problem, sorry. But right here it says, this one guy says, believe it or not, there are local markets scattered across the country that are fairly stable right now, and he marks Phoenix as one of them amongst Washington, D.C. and Detroit. But it does state Phoenix, Arizona as one of the stable markets, not one of the ones where inventory is a problem. So it's always important to read those articles, not just the headline. This is Goodyear's inventory. Over the last 2 years, you peaked in January of 2011 with 876 active listings. Since then, as of February 2nd, you are down to 542 active, which is probably even lower now. That represented a 38% decline in inventory in just 1 year, which signifies with the high demand, fewer new listings coming on, especially in the foreclosure market, this is a very good sign for your pricing. Yes?
Does this include new housing that developers are building, or is this just resale houses?
No, this is resale, mainly because I think we only had about 54 new builds, according to that previous article that said there have not been a whole lot of new builds popping up over the last few years. So they're just now starting to buy land and gear back up again.
We've issued like 500 building permits for the last 3 years each year. So would they be reflected in these as active listings or not?
No, these are strictly MLS listings. So the new builds are not generally listed in MLS unless they're a custom.
Okay. What's the trigger for? I mean, have we hit the trough where builders are actually going to start building again, or is the price rise going to have to take place before that occurs?
Well, prices are already starting to come up. They've been on an upward trend for 6 months now. So the builders are buying land currently to start filling in the gap when the inventory gets to a certain point, and it's already there. We're already experiencing for sale by owners are coming back, and the bidding wars are starting up again because the inventory is so low and there's more demand than there is to sell. So the builders are watching this and they're starting to gear up.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question on that. Has the time frame for a home that is on the market been decreased?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes, very much.
What's the average now?
Well, depending on who you talk to, sometimes it's just a matter of days. Sometimes it's hours before you get a pending. If it's under 300,000 specifically, those are going like hotcakes. Oh, the over 300,000, you're going to have more marketing time, but probably about, I'd say 3 to 4 in the luxury markets, but in the under 300 market, you're looking at very, very short marketing times.
I heard on the radio today they talked about a number of couples are walking away from their homes that can't afford the payment, and they're calling that a structural sale.
Strategic default?
Is that, that's what
it's called a strategic default. That's where they just feel that the home they paid too much for it and they just don't feel it's worth their monthly payment. We are hoping that the new program that's coming out, I think it's called HAMP, don't quote me on that. It's one of the 4-digit.
But it puts them in the same position as anybody that walks away from their home.
You mean if they foreclose?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, they will have to suffer the consequences of foreclosure on on their credit for
Yeah,
sure.
okay.
But the new program that's coming out allows those people who feel, so many people see their home as a monthly payment, not necessarily as the end result of what they're paying. So with this new program coming out that Fannie Mae has agreed to, where they can refinance regardless of how underwater they are, at today's rates, you could shave off a couple $100s off your mortgage payment, and they're hoping that that will stave off a lot of the strategic defaults. That, in combination with the 6-month increase in pricing that we've been seeing, might create enough hope for somebody to stick it out.
Very good. Joe?
Just a quick question. Are you seeing in the marketplace where individuals are buying another house because of the pricing and then walking away for the one that, they're upside down on?
Well, we saw a lot of that. Well, that's been happening for years, and the banks watch that very closely. And I was one of those people that, no, I didn't do that, but I was one of those people that sold a home, and we were buying one as we were trying to sell one, and we had to put forth a lot of signed documents, and they watched that very closely to make sure that we had it for sale. So the banks are watching for that, but that's not to say it's not happening.
Okay.
Any other questions? Go ahead, thank you.
All right. I will say, though, that if you walk away from your home right now and you want to buy another, you're going to be in a bidding war, and you're probably going to lose out to an investor. So actually getting into the mud pit of buying a property right now, you might find yourself renting. Which leads us to housing prices, and this is one of my favorite cartoons. It has a realtor in front of a home that says, "New townhome price reduced, now only $1 with zero financing." Has a couple buyers here, says, "No thanks, we're going to hold off to see how much lower it will go." And so here on February 16th, 2012 starts with increased sales and stable prices. This came from Market Watch, and it stated that we saw price increases from January of 2011 increased 9% in Phoenix, Arizona. So this was one of those national articles that's usually very good for our area to see that. Yes.
You mentioned the investors, and I know they're buying a lot of homes right now.
Oh,
Do
yeah.
you think that's going to cause a problem in like another year or 6 months, that they're going to dump them all in the market, or what do you see happening with that?
I think investors are extremely savvy, and they're not the type of people that will just dump a property all at once. So I don't expect that to be a problem. I actually expect it to be a benefit, because in the next couple of years you're going to have people who want to buy who have a lot of issues with their credit. They have a foreclosure, they have a short sale, or they just haven't been paying their bills for a while, and they are ready to buy a home, but they just can't get a loan. So these investors may be your seller financing come down the line, because when they're ready to unload their property, they own it free and clear. So we may see that be a benefit. So as far as Goodyear pricing goes, this is your 10-year trend line, so you can see where you peaked right around 300,000. And then over here, what I see here is stable pricing. It's kind of up and it's down, but it's stable pricing. This is your last year. Starts here, kind of dips and comes back up. So you're pretty stable. With the way the inventory is going at this rate, we expect this to continue in an upward state at a sustainable rate. So the good news is the bleeding has stopped for pricing. So stability is coming. This is how you compare to the rest of the west side. And I know that this is a very confusing looking chart. This arrow here is Goodyear for pricing. So what this green arrow is where everybody started, this green block going across. So what you can see is that there are a few cities that have not recovered from 2001 pricing yet. This light blue is Glendale. This dark gray here is the city of Phoenix, and orange is Avondale. So these are the 3 cities that are below where they were in 2001. But here you're seeing Surprise has done a pretty good recovery and stability. This is Peoria and Goodyear. And Goodyear's actually at the top as of this measurement.
Did you all hear that? Goodyear's at the top.
And this is monthly median sale price. It is not dollar per square foot. It's the median sale price, which is around, this line is 150,000. So once again, pricing, as you can see, it's stabilized. And if you look at the last little bit, this last 6 months right here, you'll see the upward climb. It's just ever so slight. Okay, so our foreclosure market, this is why a lot of consumers are so confused. It's because you see certain articles, and if you're like many, all you read are the headlines. You don't read the entire article. But this came out October 13th. Arizona home foreclosures were down sharply. Yay! 2 weeks later, Arizona was number 3 in home foreclosures. Rate spikes 18%. 4 days later, Phoenix foreclosures reached lowest level since early 2008. So it's if you're reading the play-by-play of the headlines that are coming, it can be really easy as a consumer to become confused. Here just recently, February 3rd, foreclosures hit 4-year low. And then once again, foreclosures rise 14% in January. These are only 2 weeks apart.
I think that's because the people that write the articles don't headline them. It's done by a different department. So
That's true, different departments.
They look at,
I'm sure no one here
the
did
newspaper
this.
back there shaking their head. That's what happens. So
That's what happens.
It's sort of a disadvantage in a sense to the writer. The writer is trying to be truthful and honest, and then
Absolutely.
they send it to the editorial staff, and then they put
Yeah.
the fiery
They're like,
titles on
what?
it.
Nobody's going to read that. I'll just change that up a little bit. So yes, and one of the things here says, this headline says Arizona home foreclosures rise 14% in January, but then right here, this came from the same article, another bit of good news is that Phoenix didn't even rank in the top 10. So for those people who are just reading on the fly and don't read the whole article, it's very easy
Well, it would seem to me
get
online
confused.
reading would be really harmful because that's, I notice when you talk to people, they read the headlines and they just kind of scan it every day, and that's what they pick up.
It's whatever they can read at a red light. And then they're done. So this chart here just shows, this red line is the notices of trustee sales, the beginning of the foreclosure process, all the people who had bad months. We peaked in 2009, where we had almost 11,000 people in a 1-month time frame receive notices of trustee sale. That's countywide. This blue line here is the number of actual auctions, the number of trustee deeds. So at auction, it will either go to a third party who purchases at auction, or it goes back to the bank. So you cannot have, as you know, one of these without one of these. So when it comes to these headlines, a lot of times you'll see plenty of spikes on the way down. And sometimes it just depends on when that particular bank is reporting their profits and losses to their investors, because they don't want to release any if they're about to, do a report. So you'll see that every about 3 or 4 months you'll see a little spike, and then another spike, and a little spike. But as long as the overall, this represents a 67% decline in the notices of trustee sale. This, keep losing my mouse, this right here, this was the beginning of 2011. There was a lot of news reports about this spike. This was a moratorium, but they just went right back up to their normal level. From here to here is a 50% decline in the number of auctions. Something to take note of when it comes to shadow inventory is that this number here is about 2,600 just for the month of January. 1,300 of those were purchased at auction. So almost 50% of all properties right now that are going to auction are purchased by a third party and do not hit shadow inventory or MLS. And this is that chart here. These are the numbers of purchases by third parties at auction. So 1,300 here, so keep that number in mind, because when we start talking about shadow inventory overall, this blue section is our shadow inventory, 4,200 as of February 2nd. To the average consumer, this seems like a lot. But when you consider how many are pending, 1,700 are pending in MLS, another 1,300 were purchased at auction, we're selling 3,000 a month. So this 4,200 in shadow is just enough for the banks to clean up and get onto the market. And then we only have 1,100 active in MLS. This purple area here, the notices of trustee sale, those are the people who have received a notice but have not been foreclosed yet. There's 15,000. Sounds like a very high number to the average consumer. It is much lower than we were in November of 2010. Yes.
Okay, when I see the different headlines, sometimes you'll hear them on the national media that anyone who's received any notice being late, is your record here, does that show the people that are about to go, that's the final notice here, or is this just any time you're late, or what do they do?
No, this is when the bank has issued, you've been late more than once, obviously. So you've received a notice of trustee sale that you have 90 days before auction.
This is like the final.
That's your final, well, sort of, but it's really not a death sentence because the short sale market is extremely hot. A lot of times before they've gotten here, if you're starting to miss payments, the short sales have become much more easier to close now than they have been in the past. And now with the refinancing options, if you're afraid that you might not be able to, they have some new refinancing options. So basically this number, not all of these will foreclose. But worst case scenario, if they do, we are at such a high period of demand, they will be gone. They're only going to last a little more longer onto our foreclosure market. But now, like I said, these people, probably, I would gather a good portion of them are already listed in MLS as short sales.
So all those investors that have been sitting on the sidelines are out now spending their money.
Oh, they've been out and about for a few years now. Yeah. Now that we're getting more national exposure, we are expecting the speculative investors are probably now going to start. Okay. So Goodyear, let's talk about Goodyear's distress level just very quickly. These are actives. You have just over half of all that's active is a normal traditional sale, non-distressed. You have only 33 foreclosures listed for sale and 223 short sales. The dollar per square foot, this is the normal sale, listed at $110 per square foot. The foreclosure at 70, I think that says 70. And then the short sale at 65. And we'll talk about how short sales compete with foreclosures. But here is what's selling. You had 42 foreclosures sell, which is more than what you even have active. So obviously that's bringing down your foreclosure inventory. You had 49 short sales closed versus 55 traditional sales. And this is the final foreclosure sell at 61, short sales at 65, and normal at, I think it says 88. So what I want to point out here is as foreclosures start to go away, as they're bought up rapidly, the short sale will no longer need to compete with a foreclosure on price. Their next competitor is your traditional sale. So naturally those prices will increase because they don't need to be lower than this. They just need to be lower than this. And a lot of times they're in just as good condition considering if somebody's living in it and they're, at least taking care of the kitchen and they're not stripped and vandalized. So that's one of the many reasons we're expecting naturally for prices to increase after the foreclosures are done away. Short sale success rates. These were a couple of articles that came out. Banks now prefer short sales to foreclosures. That came out in August. This came out on November 5th. Banks in Arizona shift to short sales. So you can see a definite shift. This is the 50-50% line. Right around March of 2011, and especially towards the middle of 2011, we saw a sharp increase in success rates to where now almost all price ranges have between a 63 to 71% chance of closing. And in the $400,000 to $800,000 range, you have a 71% chance of closing. A traditional sale in that price range has only a 55% chance for normal sales. So the short sales have definitely, if you compare it to where we were in 2009, you were lucky to have a 25% chance that your short sale would close. And under 100,000, you were lucky to have a 12% chance that your short sale would close. So we have come a long way from 2009. So that concludes my overall synopsis of your, I hope I didn't go over time too much. But if any of the articles, if you liked any of the articles, I know not too many of you are on Facebook, but we do have a fan page. And you can access all of those.
Thank you. That was a very, very good presentation and questions. Councilman
Just real quick, where are the majority of our buyers coming from?
The majority, we're having quite a few out of state. Canada and California are our top two out of Arizona buyers. And I would say we're probably at about 20%. Don't quote me on that. Haven't looked at it specifically. The last time I checked, we were at 20 to 25%, maybe even 30% of out-of-state buyers, and quite a few investors. Yes?
Yes, Sherry.
How are our neighborhoods? I don't know if you broke it down to our neighborhoods because we have a retirement community, then we have other areas. Do you know, or can we I know we've gotten those a couple months ago, but the breakdown on how our different neighborhoods are varying?
Well, it does depend on the neighborhood, and there are certain areas that were affected by foreclosures more so than others. Some of the areas that were the least affected were places like Scottsdale down through Tempe, Chandler, and Ahwatukee were the least affected. And obviously out here, you guys were one of the most, Avondale specifically was one of the most effective, followed by Glendale. But as far as your neighborhood, because Goodyear is different, because you have some upscale and you have some golf, and that tends to attract a lot of the Canadians have purchased out here, and some of the Californians, they tend to like the resort type golf living. And not to mention that with they're expecting more record crowds here with the baseball coming up, spring training, well, that's now. So they do tend to do better, especially the golf communities tend to do better.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, just thank her for her time. I appreciate you coming out and giving us the presentation.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, that sort of ends our work session now. Tell me how many minutes you'd like to have a break. 5 minutes? Or you want a little bit more than 5 minutes? So,
Yeah, please.
at least 5 minutes. All right. So this meeting's adjourned. Come back 6:15. Thank you.